Hi, Declan. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the Ticket Podcast, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Bobby. Great to be here today.
Hi, Bobby. Really excited to join you both today.
We invited you both on because we're here to talk about the recent research that we've conducted around providing a remarkable experience. So to kick us off, Lindsay, can you give us some background into the research that you conducted and what were you trying to understand and who did you chat with?
Yeah, great. So one of our objectives that we've set internally at Intercom is to deliver on a really remarkable experience for all of our customers. So while we have a pretty good idea of what we think that means, we just wanted to make sure that our idea of remarkable lined up with what our customers actually expect a remarkable experience to be. So essentially, we wanted to better define the bar for remarkable and what makes it different from just like a good experience. So we conducted some research interviews with a segment of our customer base on what they believe a remarkable experience is. So in these research sessions, we talked a lot about experiences they had with various different companies and how they rated them, from bad experiences to good experiences to really remarkable experiences. And then for remarkable experiences, we talked a lot about what it actually was that made those experiences stand out to them.
I love that. And I love that for something that could feel subjective, like this idea of remarkable, no better way to put some data behind it than talking directly to our customers themselves. And these are support people that know great support and hearing from them. So I'd love to hear from you both. Like, what were some of the most eye-opening findings from the research? Lindsay, we'll start with you and then pass it over to Declan.
I think the first thing that was surprising to me was that the research participants actually found it quite difficult to recall a remarkable experience. They could name some really good experiences or maybe frictionless experiences, but thinking about remarkable was sometimes tricky. And I think that shows both how bad the landscape of support sometimes is on the whole, and also just how high the customer expectations are. And I think another thing that stood out to me was that some of the experiences that started out quite badly could actually be turned around. So when a company had failed a customer in some ways, but they acknowledged their mistake and then they fixed it, and then they went out of their way to actually recover that experience, these were often seen as remarkable. And maybe recovering that experience could be as simple as calling them up and giving them or apologizing, or maybe it's even as much as send them over some free stuff. But I think this really shows that there's always an opportunity to deliver exceptional experiences and turn around even those most negative of ones.
Yeah, and there's something really human about that even in moments of mistakes, those can be the remarkable moments. Declan, what did you think of the research?
Yeah, Bobby, for me, I think one of the most eye-opening findings from the research was actually the level of importance placed on problem ownership. I kind of considered problem ownership to be almost like a hygiene factor for customer experience, whether that's good or remarkable. And I didn't quite appreciate how much of a difference this can mean to a customer when it's truly delivered and when there is a real sense of ownership. So that was certainly an eye-opener for me and something that I was a little bit surprised about in the research. And the other thing that stood out for me was the importance of ensuring that everyone who engages with your customer has the right knowledge and expertise of the product or service that you are supporting. And that came across really strongly as well in the research. And that applies whether our customers engage with sales, success, or support, or whoever it is that they're dealing with. You really got to be the subject matter expert for the product and service that you try to talk to the customer about.
That makes a lot of sense. And from your perspective, Declan, what do you think sets apart a remarkable experience from just merely a good one?
So let's start with what's good customer experience. I think let's kind of baseline it. What are the table stakes for good customer experience? It's all about the speed of engagement with customers, because it's only when you engage with customers, you build up trust with them that you're actually going to solve the problem that they have. It's also the product or service expertise that you bring to the table, which you kind of spoke about as well. That's pretty important as well for a good experience. The speed and quality of resolution, you've got to ultimately resolve the problem or issue that the customer had. And also, you got to make sure that you are providing it in a way that it's easy for the customer to actually get the issue resolved. An effortless experience for them, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. So they're kind of table stakes. That's what good experience is, and to some extent what customers almost demand or expect. So what uplifts this remarkable or incredible customer experience? I think one of the key characteristics is what we touched on, and it's the one that surprised me, was around problem ownership. And that's knowing that someone actually cares enough and is empowered enough to get your issue resolved, even when they can't resolve it directly themselves. Another aspect is problem understanding. So moving beyond a narrow view of the product or service and really taking more of a solution or consultative view of the customer. Like, what's the real business problem that they're encountering and that they may need help with, not just a specific question that they happen to ask you when they engage with you. So that's really important. Like, trying to understand, is there a better way of solving the problem once you understand that business context for the customer? And the concept of service recovery, which I think Lindsay kind of touched on earlier, there are times when you are going to fail. Like, that's the reality, I think, of any kind of support engagement or customer experience engagement. But when you do fail, that you close the loop with the customer, you acknowledge the failure, and you recover the situation, you actually turn it around. So making that type of kind of change is really, really important if you want to kind of move to remarkable. And finally, then, I think, you got to make sure that the engagement is very empathetic and personalized for that customer. You want to engage with the customer proactively, but you want to demonstrate that empathy and that personalization. You really understand that customer where they are. And that idea of being proactive with them, I think, is also one thing that moves it on from good to being remarkable or incredible. You're almost anticipating and expecting the type of challenges the customer has, and you engage with them ahead of time, so avoiding them having to contact you. So it's a lot of stuff there that makes it remarkable, but clearly, we do need to focus on those particular attributes and make sure that we are delivering to what a customer actually believes is remarkable rather than what we believe is remarkable.
Yeah, and what stands out to me under that list of the good customer experience, when I think back to support teams, and I'm sure listeners of this podcast who are maybe understaffed or underwater, like, you're often just fighting to get to that bar of good, right? Like, you're focusing so much on your speed of response, trying to get resolution, trying to keep the knowledge and expertise trained up. And it becomes so hard to really focus in on these remarkable elements. And so I think having them laid out like this, it's a really helpful framework to it's not rocket science, but having this framework can be a really good starting point to go in and figure out where we can improve. So I think one item that really stood out to me was this idea of problem ownership, and especially because it does require more than just you and your own support team exhibiting this strong problem ownership. So let's start with you, Lindsay. Why is it so important for companies to really take ownership of a problem?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that, especially with our customer base, that they were trying their best to self-serve as much as they can. And when they do reach out for some support, it's because they really do have an issue that they're trying to solve. And when they reach out, they expect, that someone is going to help them. However, sometimes we find that in various of the stories that we heard, that often people are passed around a lot and they never really get to a resolution. And often maybe the customers feel that the responsibility is on them to actually sort out the problem for themselves. So taking ownership of customer issues really shows that the company cares enough about your issue to help you find a resolution. I think there's a little anecdote from one of the research participants that I'll maybe share that explains it quite nicely. And I think we've all been in this situation before. One of our participants was abroad and she was having trouble with roaming on her phone, and she couldn't access roaming basically. So she called support to help her get it fixed. And initially they did fix it for her, but it came off again. She had to call back. And she went through this process, calling a few times to try and get the issue resolved. It wasn't until eventually she got through to one particular rep who really took ownership of the issue. And that rep got in touch with the technical team. It ended up being a technical issue, and got that issue resolved for her. And I think in some of the previous incidences where she was not getting resolved, she could kind of tell that the team were just kind of trying to close a conversation rather than focusing on the resolution. So I think in this example, that final rep she got showed that they cared enough to help her get a proper resolution to her issue, and they really took ownership of her problem.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you there is that none of the reps, none of the teammates did anything wrong, right? But if we have just these kind of silos that we're in, or these boxes that we're looking to check, did I send the article? Did I pass them the right person? Did I close the conversation, hit this metric? That's not the same as truly having seen that ownership. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Declan, what's your take on this?
Well, I think Lindsay has hit the nail on the head. Ownership is primarily about showing a customer that you actually really care and you want to remove the blocker for them or answer the question for them, and you're doing everything that you can in your power to do that. And at the end of the day, a customer doesn't really care about our organization structure. They just want the first person they engage with to make sure the problem gets sorted. Like, that's ultimately what the best effortless experience is for a customer. So ideally, you always want to get the issue or question to the right person. So again, to think about actioning this, like, you really want to make sure you get the right person in front of your customer at the right time. However, if you don't, you need to make sure that you're empowering the person that actually does receive the issue to take that ownership and display that care and ensure that the problem does get addressed on behalf of the customer. Doesn't mean they have to address it themselves, but they're making sure that someone else is taking responsibility for addressing it. And they're keeping a level of ownership until that happens. The way I describe it, sometimes in sport organizations, there's a fire and forget mentality. You pass it off to a colleague and you forget about it. Ownership means you don't forget about it. You actually make sure that it does get resolved on behalf of the customer. And that's pretty critical. You also have to make sure that you encourage and reward ownership, and you imply a continuous improvement mindset as well, because you really want to identify, like, why wasn't someone able to take ownership up front, or why weren't they able to resolve the problem? So kind of fostering that continuous improvement mindset is also pretty critical here as well, in terms of the concept of ownership.
We were talking about this last week, right? Where it's like, if a customer's reaching out to a CEO of a company on Twitter, at that point, they don't care if it was CS or sales or a billing team. They just want it fixed. And that same ownership that you would see from a CEO, it's like, that's what we need across everybody. It should never have to even get to that point. So it really hits the nail on the head. Lindsay, is there anything you'd like to add on to what sets apart a remarkable experience, like from a good one that came out from the research findings?
Yeah, I think problem ownership was the main thing, but I think sometimes what we take for granted is this idea of like understanding problems. And I think that really helps with being able to take ownership of problems. So participants really appreciated when companies took the time to really understand their problem. So there was examples that I heard where a company would just give information within the ballpark of what they were asking, rather than, really deeply understanding what they were trying to do and be able to give like a very thoughtful answer and a correct answer. And, sometimes it's a workaround rather than a direct answer, but understanding what they're trying to achieve and then being able to deliver a good response to that.
That makes a lot of sense. And for this question, go for both of you. Like, what does expertise, what does this look like in an AI first world where we have AI answering more and more of these questions? I imagine that bar is going to look a little bit different in the future.
I think in the AI world, and that whole concept of expertise and really understanding the problem, it's really making sure that an engagement with an AI agent has access to the right knowledge and content that really ensures that it has the best opportunity to present the right answer to the customer, and that you're thinking about the conversation flow even through the whole AI agent phase of the engagement. That you're getting more information around the customer context all the time, and you're making it kind of easier then for an AI technology to actually give a very precise answer to the customer's problem.
Declan, are there any specific actions our customer support team are planning to take following the research findings?
Yeah, I think that the research has certainly reframed our thinking somewhat around what a remarkable customer experience is. I think we were focused on broadly the right things when we thought about a remarkable customer experience, but I think the research has helped us think differently about what we want to prioritize. And it'll definitely influence what we do in the second half of the year around our plans to try and improve and drive a better customer experience. So from that point of view, it's been really valuable research just to help us prioritize. I think the other action we will take out of this is reevaluating how we measure the customer experience. We clearly can't rely on going out and surveying our customers through interviews all the time. It's great to do. It's great to get the research, but we can't do that on an ongoing basis. We need to know, are we actually delivering, to our promise of a remarkable customer experience? So we have been working on a new mechanism to assess every single interaction that we have with customers and a fair customer experience score. I think one thing we will do in that regard is reassess how we're evaluating problem ownership, given, how big a factor it is in terms of remarkable customer experience. And we need to build that in the right way into the new customer experience score. So definitely a few things that we need to do around reprioritizing what we're going to focus on for H2, and also reassessing how we actually measure the customer experience and making sure that we have some way of understanding, did we actually demonstrate that problem ownership that customers really value and want?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the CSAT question of asking how did the agent Declan do? That's only going to be a tip of the iceberg. It's not going to get anywhere near that full idea of problem ownership. So having a better inferred way to see all of that, that's really smart. Lindsay, are there any takeaways you'd recommend?
So one of the things I've been thinking about is that while the support team is, with a cool face, and as you mentioned there, like Declan, the support agent, and his CSAT rate, that's being the tip of the iceberg. I think that really the problem ownership is like a whole company problem and initiative. And I think we need to be thinking about the right processes and policies and workflows that need to be in place to really allow every teammate within Intercom to own issues, that customer issues that they can come across. So I think we need to think about it at basically a company level rather than just within our support org.
That's music to my ears. I like the sound of that. So Declan, providing a remarkable customer experience, it does set a really high bar. From your perspective, what actionable advice would you give support leaders who want to aim for this?
So I think there's a few things that come to mind, but I think the research that Lindsay has shared provides the first actionable advice. Like, take the time to really understand what constitutes a remarkable customer experience for your customers. Don't assume you know it, or don't assume that it's the same as maybe a different industry. Really be very specific around your customers and take the time to understand what remarkable means for them. I think that's the first kind of actionable advice. Second one is around make sure that you can measure the customer experience and that you can demonstrate you are improving as you raise the bar. Like, some point in talking about, well, we want to deliver a remarkable experience and we want to kind of build to that because it's always a moving goal because customer expectations increase. So you got to be able to demonstrate that you're actually delivering on it. So if you can't measure the customer experience, you can't demonstrate that you're moving in the right direction. So ideally you would be able to infer the experience for every single customer interaction that you have, and don't solely rely on things like CSAT or NPS or customer effort score. While they're important to get that direct feedback from customers, you also want to be able to infer for every single interaction you've had, whether it's been a good experience enough for your customers, and then take appropriate action, if you need to drive improvement. And that leads on to the third actionable piece of advice is make sure you build up a culture of continuous improvement in your customer service operation. Like, really seek out the opportunities to drive improvement and have the appropriate mechanisms in place for your business to ensure that you are being intentional about the improvements that you drive. Everything that we do has the opportunity to drive improvement, and we could, in theory, boil the ocean is the term. Like, you could actually take on too many things. But if you really are very precise around where is the best place for you to focus, you can, as I say, be very intentional around how you're improving that customer experience over time, and taking that continuous improvement mindset into how you operate in general is really, really important.
For any support leaders listening to this that, again, feel like they're resource constrained, feel like they're maybe a little underwater, any advice that you would give them, again, on just like how to get started, even if they're already tight on bandwidth?
I think one of the best things you can do is really embrace the opportunity that AI is presenting for customer service at this point in time. Whether that's using an AI agent, whether it's using AI Copilot or using AI analytics, like the combination of those three functions can really begin to carve out the time that you need, to be able to deliver that remarkable customer experience and go above and beyond for your customers and be proactive, etc., and take on board all the improvements that you need to drive. So don't underestimate the ability of AI, one, to surface where you need to do better, but more importantly, to actually carve out time for your team, particularly if you're using an AI agent to take on some of the more mundane activities. If you're using Copilot to drive efficiency across your support team as well. Like, use the bandwidth that you free up to really drive to a remarkable customer experience and uplift the whole kind of service experience. And all of a sudden, then you move from being kind of almost like a cost center for your business to being more of a value center. You're actually engaging with your customers in a different way. You're being more consultative. You're actually applying a solution mindset to the issues and problems that they have. And that's where I think the real value comes down the line in terms of customer service and its ability to deliver the customers and deliver back to the business.
Well, Lindsay, Declan, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you on again for future research, and talk soon.
Thanks, Bobby.
It was fun.